Hey, this is Gina Grad.
Hi, this is Teresa Strasser.
Hi, everyone. This is Mike Errico.
Hey there, this is Casey Cavalier.
I'm Rocky Rose.
And you are listening to The Jay Franzi Show.
Lucky you.
Welcome to The Jay Franzi Show, a behind-the-curtain look at the entertainment industry with insights you can't pay for and stories you've never heard. Now, here's your host, Jay Franzi.
Well, hello, and welcome to the show. I am Jay Franzi, and this is your backstage pass to the entertainment industry. This week, we get to talk with an amazing drummer. We get to talk with Don Parker. We'll talk to him about growing up in a legendary music family, playing with Avery, Crabtree, and we'll discuss what it was like to open up for Kid Rock and Tracy Byrd while playing with Kyle Fields. Now, Donnie, he is one of Kentucky's finest. He is an all-around great guy, and I can't wait to talk with him tonight. So if you would like to join in, comment, or fire off any questions, please head over to jfranzi.com. Now, let's get started. Don, sir, how are you?
Good. Enjoying this warm summer night. I'm sitting outside.
You should have said something. I would have come by your area. We could have done the whole thing outside. It would have been perfect.
That would have been great.
All right, sir. Well, let's just go ahead and dive in. You come from a musical family. What can you tell me about your start with the family?
Oh, wow. So my whole life, my dad, his side of the family is where my music come from. My dad come from 10 siblings. Oh, wow. They all play music. Every single one of them played some kind of musical instrument, and most of it was bluegrass. And then the generation after them, most of us, well, I say most, at least half of us picked it up in some form or fashion. So, we've got my dad's generation, and then we have mine and my sister's generation. Then my dad took off and joined the Renfro Valley staff band when I was probably 8 years old. So from 8 up into my teenage years, I was backstage at Renfro Valley. I watched every show, every rehearsal, and of course thought it was the most boring thing that could, at the time, but I didn't know how much I was learning, right, and how much I would appreciate that later on.
How much do you wish you could go back now?
Oh, I wish I could go back and see those same folks. A lot of them are gone. A lot of them are not with us anymore. That was Dad started there in 1988.
Oh, wow.
I would hang out with Joe Clark and Terry, his son. They had their act going on down there, and some great, just A-class musicians. Randy Hayes was playing there at the time. He was, just off the road with Keith Whitley, so he had that going on. So I got to meet all kinds of influential people at a very, very young age, and I didn't know how that would affect me.
Well, that's pretty cool. You talk about the generations and following your dad around and getting inspired by your dad. But you also mentioned your sister, Chelsea, fiddle player, and she's amazing too. But I guess what I'd like to know is, how did you guys select the instruments that you want to play, and can you play multiple instruments?
So I can dabble with other instruments besides the drums, but besides maybe bass, you probably would never catch me on stage with another instrument. But I love all instruments. If I see one laying around, I want to give it a try. I want to see if I can do something with it. But now my dad, going back to him, he was multi-instrumentalist on stage. So, there was always something laying around our house. But my dad has a twin. So my dad is named Ronnie, and his twin is named Donnie. And Donnie is who I was named after. Donnie was a drummer. So he traveled regionally. He traveled with a guy named Josh Logan down in our area. Josh was a pretty big country act, in the 80s and 90s. He was pretty big then. So Donnie played with him. The way I got started on drums was they had a rehearsal. They'd started some new band or new project, was going to record. And so Donnie brings his drums over to my dad's place, and they had a rehearsal room, and he left them set up. So I would sit there and watch him rehearse, and I'm like,
I can do that.
I want to do what Uncle Donnie did. I think I can do that. So I just had an obsession with those drums. I loved them. And when they would leave through the summer and I was out of school, everybody was at work, and I was home with my mom, sneak in there and get on Uncle Donnie's drums,
And were you playing them with permission?
Oh, yeah. So since birth, when I was born, my dad and my mom had decided I was going to be John Michael Parker. So that was going to be John, not Don. And my Uncle Donnie, my dad's twin, shows up at the hospital and he goes, oh no, his name's not John. His name is going to be Don, because that's going to be my namesake. And my dad conceded and said, okay. And then Donnie had a son, and guess what? His name's Ronnie, So
I was going to say, it better not be John.
That's right. That's right. So, I could get by with anything. So it was with permission, and I remember vividly sitting down, and the first tape back then had a cassette of like Keith Whitley, because all we had in the house was country music,
Right.
My dad was one of those guys that said, we play all kinds of music, country and Western. So I landed on drums that way, and I remember putting that tape in. I can't remember which one it was, whether it was, the Miami or the one before. I can't remember that much about it, but I remember attempting to try to play with this, and I'm sure it was horrible at the time.
Well, let's take a moment here, because there's a couple things I want to touch on there.
Yeah.
First of all, what age was this where you started playing the drums in a more serious fashion?
So when the drums were being left over at the house, I was probably 7 or 8, right before the time that I was talking about when Dad joined the Renfro Valley.
Right, which was 88.
Yeah, that was 88. So, 88 or 89. So, yes, 6 or 7 when those drums were being left over there, and I was just obsessed with them.
So you developed that passion early. You knew that's what you wanted to do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like I automatically began wanting my own drum kit, asking Dad, hey, when can I have my own drum kit? I want my own drum kit.
Well, that's a good point, because most people don't start with a full kit. Did you start sitting in front of a full kit?
I did. So what's different about me and a lot of other just guys that I look up to is they marched first. So they started with a snare drum, or they started in the band room. But I think a lot of that has to do with access, accessibility. I had access to any instrument at any time. It was at my disposal. So, a lot of kids back then, they would come over to my house and they were like, wow, you'll have all these instruments.
Right.
And that's just not the norm. A lot of kids don't see instruments until some type of music class or middle school band. And if they have the interest, then they do it.
Sure. I remember when I started on drums, but it was, like you said, it was just a snare drum. Matter of fact, I remember with the snare drum, we get this little rubber mat, and that's what we were supposed to practice on at home. And
That's right.
I mean, I would do my little rhythms and so forth, but I was never a drummer, and I knew I was never going to be a drummer. So, I mean, it just wasn't my instrument. But
Sure.
I just don't have that kind of coordination. I wish I did, but I don't have that kind of coordination. So, I mean, how far into it did you know that you actually had the coordination?
Okay, so I had a pivotal point, maybe a couple years in. I was trying to play this music, and I would get half of it. I would be like, okay, something's not right. And I remember fast forward maybe 10 years old. I'm thinking 10. The lines get blurred after a while, but at this point, I was splitting time between my mom's house and my dad's house. My dad had remarried, and my stepmother was a musician too. heavy influence for me as well because she played at Renfro Valley, you know. So I'm in the basement at this point with still Uncle Donnie's drum kit. They just moved to a different location. Still hadn't had my own drum kit. I'm down there and I'm trying to put some stuff together, and our basement was kind of like one of those half finished deals, you know, like it was finished enough to have a painted floor and have a band set up, and there was electricity, and the washer and dryer was down there. So I remember my stepmother vividly. She comes down the steps and she's loading laundry in, and she says, "Hey, the kick and the snare are opposite. Play the kick on 1 and 3 and play the snare on 2 and 4. Try that." And it was like light bulb moment. You know, like, all right, let me see if I can do this. Let me see if I can do this. And like, it was almost within a day or two, these songs that I was trying to play before, I'm like, okay, I'm not playing what I would call 4 in the floor now, like kick drum all the time, to like, oh, this makes sense. And that was the pivotal point where I'm like, okay, she's taught me. I've had my first lesson right there. That's the only time anybody ever tried to say anything, including my uncle who played. He would just be like, "Here, try it like this." He was a player, not a teacher at all.
Right.
My stepmother was, during the day, an English teacher, so she was a teacher. And, you know, at night, they played music, you know, on the weekends, but she was a career teacher. So that was a ultimate pivotal point when she said those words, play the kick and the snare opposite. And I thought, this is it. Okay. And it, like I said, light bulb moment. And then I started putting songs together then. That's when I knew. I was like, okay, I can actually maybe play along. I've got the meter to keep up.
Yeah, just to me, that coordination to have all 4 limbs doing something differently is just tough. But from that point, how far along until you get your own drum kit?
Probably, let's see, I would say if I was 10 then, and by the time I was getting into be a teenager, so probably 12 or 13, I got into rock and roll. All I'd ever known was country. Like I said, in my household, it was country and bluegrass and gospel, and that's what you listened to. That was it. We didn't have any other kind of music in my dad's household. But, you know, as everyone else, I had friends at school, and I remember going back to my mother. She managed apartments. So someone got evicted or someone moved out, whatever. I ended up with this box of CDs, tapes, this mixture of all this music. And in that, this person was into like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, all of the grunge was on the scene. You know, there was an AC/DC album in there. And she just brings them home, sits them down, and goes, "If you want these, you can have them." So immediately, as a preteen teenager, I was like, this stuff rocks. I love it. What are these drums? You know, Dave Grohl.
Right.
On that Nirvana album, I'm like, oh, holy smokes, this is it. So I immediately, with my friends at school, were like, we need to start playing music. You know, there was a couple people at school, a couple people that lived on my street. We had no idea what we were doing, but we knew we wanted to create some of this rock and roll. So at that point is when I think Dad gave me the credit of like, okay, he wants to play. Of course, he didn't like the fact that I wanted to play rock and roll then at that moment. But he one day got up, we went to the music store. We used to hang out at this place called Carl's Music in Lexington. It's not been there in years, but it was huge hangout on Saturdays, huge hub for musicians in Lexington. And we went one Saturday morning, which was normal for us. He would go over and get strings and hang out and talk, you know, see where everybody's playing, see what everybody's doing. One Saturday there, we left with the drum kit. He was just in the right mood, you know, the timing was right. And it was like, oh, I've got drums now. I can do this now. This is it.
Do you remember what kind of drums they were?
Tama Rock Stars. At Tama Rock Stars.
Fitting.
Antique Blue, and I thought it was the greatest thing ever because back then Dave Grohl was playing. He was playing Thomas, and I didn't care what level of Thomas I had. As long as they said that name.
Right.
They said Tom the drums on the front, I was fine.
Right.
So I did get that. It was a pretty pivotal moment. At that point, I thought, well, maybe I can just be a rocker.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because coming from a country, like you said, gospel, bluegrass as well, but coming from a country family and now getting exposed to rock music, you mentioned Nirvana and Dave Grohl. What other influences have you taken from the rock world?
Well, I think in drum world, I'm going to automatically be influenced by the rock and rollers. Everyone listened to Ringo Starr. Everyone listened to John Bonham. Like when you hear that stuff, you automatically know, okay, that guy's playing drums different than the guy before him. Like, okay, this is different.
Well, I want to ask you a question here, because not being a drummer myself, what do you think makes Ringo or John Bonham different than other drummers?
Well, I think with Ringo, I think with him, and this is coming from, don't kill me here. I'm not a huge Beatles fan, but I do know that he would play outside of the box. So instead of playing like a straight groove through something, he would utilize, his toms or play something different on the snare where it wasn't just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. He would come up with something different, almost melodic. It was almost melodic drumming, and I think he put a real spin on it.
Do you think he was doing it on purpose? Like, do you think he knew what he was doing?
His stuff sounds more like natural ability to me. I mean, just like, in drum world, Ringo's popular, but not close to where your normal drummer would say, hey,
Right.
This guy. But if you study it, I always did appreciate that, like if you listen to Come Together, he could have easily just played that song as simple kick snare. He did not do that. He decided not to do that. And there's many more, obvious songs that you can tell that in his drumming, but you can tell that he decided to take road less traveled with just about every track.
Well, what about Bonham?
So I think Bonham it goes unsaid. Bonham probably goes down as maybe the greatest rock drummer of all time because he did it first. He started how to play big. You listen to his recordings, and they don't have the equipment we do. You probably have better podcast equipment than what they were recording on, for drums anyways. And those drums sound huge. He knew how to play big, round, and some of the stuff today I can't play that he played then. Even today, people can't replicate it like he did it.
I never had the opportunity to see him play, but we had Chris Franz on the show a while back, and he's on the road with Jason Bonham.
Oh, yeah.
And when they came through town here, I went to see them and got to meet Jason. And I got to watch him play, and they played all of the Zeppelin songs. And it gave me a whole new appreciation for the Zeppelin songs, seeing them played live. Now, when I was younger, those were the first records I ever received. And I listened to them and loved them, but seeing Jason play was just amazing.
Right. And I mentioned those two bands and those two drummers, and I didn't listen to them a lot coming up. That wasn't the music I was listening to, but I knew the drumming was special looking back then, and I just knew that was special. And talking about Jason, I've watched him play, and he does an amazing job replicating that stuff. You can tell it's a little different, but man, can he ever play. He is a solid guy. He can play some drums.
But for you, you've had an opportunity now to play with everybody in the area. And when I say the area, I mean, I know we start in Kentucky, but it spreads out and you get to play in other places.
Sure.
Who was your first person that you played with that gave you a break that was at a bigger scale than just playing in your neighborhood?
Okay, so in high school, I went through the the rock and roll phase like everyone does. And I've still got my rock and roll phase still is going on now. I just don't play rock and roll music now. But my senior year of high school, I was sitting at home. The phone rings, landline. There's no cell phones inside. You know how that is. Landline, and it's this lady. She's on the line, and she says, "Hey, I got your name from so and so." I don't even remember who gave her my name, but she said, "I heard you could play drums, and I've got a dance hall in Renfro Valley, and we've been open a year, and we play country music, and we need a drummer desperately because our drummer, he was sick at the time, and he didn't know if he was going to come back." So she said, "Would you come audition with us this Saturday and play the show? We'll give you $50. The gig paid $50 every Saturday night. And I said, "Well, I guess, sure. I'll come try it." And it was a traditional country show. I mean, they played 60s, 70s, and some 80s country music, but nothing past probably 1990. I graduated high school in 2000. She would have called me in 99. So this was either going into my senior year or during my senior year when school had just started. And I took this gig and I was like, okay, I'll try it. I'll come down and try it because it was $50.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I may be able to make some money with this drum thing. Of course, I was working full time already by that. I would go to school during the day, and I was working for Dad. We've had a family, contracting business for 40 years almost. So I was working. So I go down there, and for me to back up a little bit, I have to back up and talk about my dad switching from bluegrass to country music. He started playing steel guitar. So during my high school career, while I was in high school, Dad used me for a metronome to learn how to play steel guitar. So, steel guitar, that's traditional country music. So I would sit nightly almost with my dad, and I would lay down a shuffle, or I would lay down a country track or just a drum track for him to practice his steel. Every night almost. If I was there, that's what we did. That's how we kept our night off. I would sit down for a couple hours. So fast forward, I'm in my senior year. I show up to this show, and of course, they're thinking this is a kid. Because these are older folks.
Right.
Older folks. And I sit down, I set my stuff up, and I sit down to play. And things go really well because all of that woodshedding I did with my dad for his sake, I learned a ton of country songs, and it was mostly what they were playing because they had steel, they had piano, and they were playing these songs that my dad was practicing steel guitar to. So they're like, "We can't believe you know these songs." And I'm like, "Well, I've been playing them for 3 years. Dad's trying to learn how to play steel guitar." So, by mistake, I learned all these songs, just by default because Dad wanted to be a steel player.
Well, you say wanted to be. He's definitely known for being one now.
He is. That I witnessed the whole thing.
You're the reason behind it all. You can take the credit.
Well, I'll give him the credit for teaching me those country
Traditional country songs.
So yeah, that was my first paying opportunity in the music business, and I took that job and I kept it for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
I played every Saturday night for probably the next 2.5 or 3 years.
All right, so you played every Saturday. Did they practice at all?
So the way they did it is you showed up at 4:00, you practiced the songs that you're going to do that night. We had a 7:30 show. So we would show up at 4:00 and we would rehearse the songs that they were going to throw in then. Because they would have special guests every week. we would have the band that played most of the night, but they would always have at least one special guest singer or two, and they would get up and sing a few songs. So we would have to rehearse before the show. So we would rehearse from like 4 to 6. And then it was one of those shows where most of the time the band wore matching shirts. We were in uniform. We're playing this dance hall, and they were traditional people. They wanted us to dress the part,
Right.
be the part, everything. That was part of it, you know.
Well, that's cool, though. I mean, it's cool. I mean, that's all part of the vibe for that type of thing. So
Sure.
do you feel like that band is giving you that ability to sit in and play at any song at any time now?
Well, I wouldn't give that band that credit for it, but I did learn from them how the business kind of worked, like having to wear the uniform, play the material, earn your money type of thing. You know, it wasn't as much as everybody wants it to be. 99% of the time, it's not just rock and roll. You know, it's not like show up,
Right.
do what you want. It's way more structured than that. So I do credit that band for giving me the opportunity to learn young. Like, this is a job. Like, I'm taking a job. I have to know this material. I have to be there at a certain time. I have to dress a certain way at the time. You know, that was part of it. So I credit them for that.
All right. Well, let's kind of fast forward a little bit, because you have gone from playing these dance halls, which are small, intimate locations, as a young kid. And recently you've been playing venues of 32,000 people. So what was that transition from the dance hall to those larger gigs? What was the next major step for you?
So next major step, fast forward 2005, and that's when Avery Crabtree came into the picture. So that was during my, I'd say, party phase. I was going out on the weekends, and I landed at Austin City. So in Lexington, so Austin City Saloon, you know, everybody went there, it seemed, you know, I say everybody, you know, everybody in the live music scene went to Austin City.
Oh, yeah.
So I went up there, and that's when George Molton was playing. And then George cut for Nashville, and Avery stepped into George's place, and he had a house band there, and they were called Crosswind. I went and watched them at least once a week. I didn't miss it. I can't say I always went for the band. Avery knows that. But I would watch this band and hang out with my buddies, drink some, you know, that was just the watering hole, man.
Sure.
So Avery at the time, so they played there for a year or so, and the band broke up, whatever happened. And Avery had decided to say, well, I'm just going to go out on my own. I'm going to be Avery. I'm not going to be Crosswind. And the band quit, so he's with no band. So cue my dad back into the loop. My dad, a guy named Jerry Smith, he lives out in Paducah, great guitar player. Hank Rose, who was in George's band at the time when George moved to Nashville. So they formed Avery's new band with another drummer, and I don't know the drummer's name, but you know, the original guy. So everybody's on pins and needles. They played every Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Well, Avery's band quit on Saturday. Avery had his first solo show on Thursday.
All right. Well, hold on one second here. Was Avery the front man of that other band?
He was. He fronted the other band.
Okay, because I know he wanted to be a lead guitar player and stumbled into being a front man.
He did. But at the time, during that time, Avery was playing mostly acoustic guitar because he was playing a lot more country, and the guitar bug had bit him, but not bit him hard yet. During that time, he was playing electric. He did have an electric. I mean, he played a lot of electric then, but like when we first started that band, he would play acoustic a lot, like played rhythm, you know. But he did aspire to be I think still does sometimes, and I tell him he's crazy because he's such a good friend. I think he still aspires to be a sideman lead guitar player.
I would personally shoot him if he did that.
That's right.
He's an amazing frontman.
He is. He's one of the best at doing what he does, reading a crowd, picking material. I mean, he just knows what to do.
And nothing is planned.
Nothing. So
I don't know how you keep up with him.
well, that's the way it started. So they were supposed to start this new. He's going to be a solo act this Thursday night. So I ride up with Jerry and my dad. I ride up to their rehearsal because Jerry at the time, his name was Jerry Solon Smith. So he was one of my best friends. I named my oldest son Solon after him. So we get to that rehearsal and they set up. I'm listening to everybody noodle around on their instruments and do their thing. Drummer is fantastic. I'm like, this guy has some serious chops. He's really good. Turns out he has no idea half of the country songs that Avery's wanting to play. I'm watching this go down at their rehearsal. It's me and a few other guys hanging out with the bartenders that I knew from the weekends.
Right.
But I see this rehearsal declining because Avery's calling standard songs, and the guy's a great drummer. He has no idea. If you don't know the material,
right,
then you just don't know it, So they have this meeting afterwards, and they're like, guys, we got to play Thursday, and I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he's going to do it. So going back to my dad for the 50th time, my dad goes, well, Don plays drums. And Avery's like, he calls me Donnie. A lot of those guys call me Donnie. Donnie plays drums? He was like, yeah, but I'm not giving him a reference. He will have to earn it on his own. Because even though I had played, I was still very green to that situation.
Especially to that level.
And I remember Avery calls me that night, late after that rehearsal. He calls me. I'm back home, sitting on the back deck, kind of like I am tonight. Phone rings, and he goes, hey, Donnie, it's Avery. You want to play in my band? And I'm like, are you sure? He goes, I'm dead serious. I'm sure. Can you play Thursday night? And I'm like, sure. He was like, well, we're not going to do a rehearsal. Just show up. We'll sound check, run through a few, and we'll get this thing going. And that was like off to the races for me. That job at Austin City, Thursday, Friday, Saturday for the next 2 years, we didn't take off. I mean, Christmas Day even, we would go in Christmas Day night, and they would open the bar up, and they've had people in there. It was crazy. But that's where things really turned for me.
That's where it all came together.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I mean, that's where I saw you play with Avery at Austin City. I mean, it was a cool venue. It was my first time ever being there. But I really enjoyed it. But I could see how if you played there, especially 3 nights a week for 2 years, that things would just have to click. And Avery's one of those guys who he'll call songs out that you probably haven't even heard in years.
Oh, there were songs then that I'd never heard before in my life because Avery, when I started playing with him, was my first introduction into Motown, my first introduction into rhythm and blues or just blues.
So what do you do in that case?
So I credit Avery and I credit some of the bass players that played with us still to this day. It was like a huge music lesson for me. Some hard lessons learned because in the beginning, I was train wrecking some stuff myself. I knew all the country material and I knew that was
right.
70% of the night, 75% of the night. I know these country songs. Even if I don't, I've heard enough of them. I know the recipe.
Right.
But then, along comes Otis Redding's song and I'm like, I never listened to Otis. I've only heard this on the radio maybe once,
So how nervous were you?
Oh, terribly nervous. I remember my very first night. I go in, and the manager of the bar, her name was Mama Tish.
Of course it was.
Yes, Mama. She still has a bar in Nicholasville today, but she managed there, and she was. I mean, she runs hot ship over there. I'll say that. And she walks up that stage, and she's used to me coming in there, in the party atmosphere. And she looks at me, and I'm green, I'm clean cut, shorter hair then, and she goes, "You better kick the crap out of those drums." And immediately, all the blood left my body. I'm like, I'm gonna fail. This is gonna be bad. I'm getting thrown on the hot seat. I mean, there was other drummers coming in that wanted that chair.
Of course.
It wasn't paid a salary, really. I mean, we were getting paid for 3 nights. They paid good. I can't ever say they didn't pay. They compensated us well for that gig. It was sought after. And Avery said, "No other drummers. I'm sticking with him." He just gave me that opportunity, and it stuck. And it didn't matter who come in fishing for the gig. He was like, "I've got my drummer. I like that dude, and I'm gonna stick with him."
Now, you still play with Avery to this day, so how long's that been?
So, Avery and I played solid, other than maybe like a 1-year break from 2005 until 2020 on the regular. And COVID happened, and everything shut down.
Sure.
But if you count the last year and the 16 years of music with that guy. Interesting enough about Austin City, so Avery, we lasted there for 2 years. Avery left and started doing some other things. You know how that goes. Like a phase will end, a season will end. So that being said, Avery took another job somewhere, or he was playing different places. I ended up in 3 more house bands after Avery at Austin City. So I sat in that chair for years. I think I've been in every house band at Austin City. Every house band that's played at Austin City since 2001, I've been in that band in some form or fashion.
That's insane.
So everybody that's had a house band there, I've been in their band. So that particular venue, I camped out in it for 12, 13 years. It was just my regular spot to be.
Well, we've had Avery on the show, and, I think Avery's fantastic. He's just one of the best performers around. We've also had Kyle Fields on the show, which I know you've also had an opportunity to perform with. And matter of fact, you guys just recently did 32,000 people opening for Kid Rock. You just opened up for Tracy Byrd this past weekend. I mean, how did that all come about for you?
Well, so I think the first time I played with Kyle was also at Austin City back in, I think it was 2015. And it was a one-off thing. He wanted to play Austin City. He was living here. He wasn't living in Nashville at the time. We played the show with him. We become kind of friends, and it didn't happen much after that. We didn't play as much. But fast forward, gosh, I guess 4 or 5 years ago, we started playing again some, doing one-offs. And Kyle and I just got real close. I would go down to Nashville, visit him on his gig or whatever. And when he was playing Broadway, Kyle was playing Broadway.
Sure.
Very, very heavy man. And I would go down and jam with another band or get a gig and always go see Kyle. And it kind of just evolved from there. Like, hey, I got this little show, in Moorhead or this town. Can you do it? I'm going to be in Kentucky. Can you come do that? And it just evolved from there, and I think I've been with Kyle now probably over 3 or 4 years as a constant, especially when he plays big events or Kentucky events.
Well, I saw him over at Laurie's Roadhouse, and I know you've played with him there that night as well. But then he just opened up for Kid Rock doing that 32,000 people. Was that the largest audience that you've ever played in front of?
Oh, absolutely, it was.
What was that like for you?
Well, it was one of those things. We were there. We showed up that day, and we knew it was going to be a big show. We knew that Kid Rock's there, Brantley Gilbert's there.
Yeah.
Travis Tritt was there, Miranda Lambert was there. Like, you could just drop names all day long of the people who were playing, this show. But when we showed up, no one was there. It was this big empty field and a stage crew just putting out equipment because, they had the night before had packed up.
Right.
Jason Aldean, everybody had took it to the next town or whatever. And then, so you just have these stage guys running around, setting up Kid Rock stuff and setting up Brantley Gilbert stuff. And we go backstage. They're like, oh, go check out the stage if you want, And, of course, I'm just all about it, walking backstage, and I see these grand pianos and these huge, huge drum kits and, whatever, guitar racks that are like 30 deep. And I'm like, oh, this major
real.
production. This major production. And we had played some big stages before,
Sure.
but 5, 6, 7,000 people, maybe 10, but nothing like.
Well, to put that into comparison, your small, typical theater is around 5,000 to 7,000 people. And then when you set foot in front of 32,000 people, you're talking like a stadium, like a football stadium. I mean, that's a lot of people. So, I mean, let's go back to the moment you said you got there and there was nobody there but the crew. Did you understand what was coming? I mean, did it just look massive?
I sort of did, because I'm looking out and it looks like a cow pasture on a ranch, because this big area is cleared.
Right. It's an outdoor festival, just to set the scene.
Yeah. So, you look out there and I'm like, I wonder if it's going to fill all of that space. Meanwhile, they bring us in the back way or whatever you want to call it. You don't think that there's 20,000 people there while we're sound checking, waiting at the gate. You don't know that just over the hill, these people are going to flood in. But what was crazy is we sound checked, we go backstage, they feed us, like we have a green room tent.
What did they feed you?
Okay, so for there, they had full catering. So they had that day, it was like, we showed up after breakfast for lunch, any sandwich you want, anything you want. They had Pepsi coolers, beer coolers if you wanted that. They had that for lunch, and then they had a full menu, like chicken. If you want to be vegan, they had that option. The I guess what they would call the Kid Rock menu. I guess we were eating off his rider. They didn't give us a choice, but I mean, full catering, and then we had the green room tent that was there, and they had like couches set up, pool table, open bar, of course. So had the bar, and then they had people serving barbecue in there for like a snack. Yeah. So, it was like, they rolled out the red carpet for us, which we're not used to all the time. It's especially if you're direct support or even just local support, you just don't get that.
Sure.
You don't get that option. So anyways, we show up, get there, we go back and eat dinner. I really didn't get a look at the crowd until we were back on deck. It's like, okay, we're on deck now. Like, this is
getting real.
Yeah. So we're sitting there side stage, and I look out and I'm like, holy smokes. This is big. It's huge. Like, there was no one out there. Now I can't see any ground. It's all covered. All that grass is now covered with people. And it will take you back a little bit. It'd be like, okay, because you can feel them before you ever get out there. These people, whether they're just talking with each other or screaming for the band to come on stage, you hear this
rumble.
It's a rumble out there. It's like, oh, they're ready to go, And I think there was a DJ before us, but we were kind of the first. So they had the DJ, And then we were the first ones to see these people. So they were fired up. They were ready for live music for sure when we hit the stage.
So right before you go on stage, what's going through your mind?
Well, I'm sitting here thinking, do I have my set list? Is everything going to stay intact? Is my drum kit going to not fall apart?
And so you are thinking about all those basic things like, drum
Yes.
placements, did
Yes.
I tighten this? All of the typical things someone would worry about.
Well, and I'm thinking like, I hope we perform well. But I knew that we rehearsed the show. We played with Kyle long enough. I knew that we could play this material.
But different venue. I mean, there's a lot of variables there that aren't in your normal set.
That's right. But I have to give credit again to like the production crew. Those guys got you. They hype you before you go out there. These guys did. That man, looking forward to you guys. You guys sounded good. Sound check. If you need anything, we're right over here. Look at us. Talk to us. Whatever you need, we got you. We're gonna come out there and get you whatever you need. So having that, and really, you got a little butterflies, but then there's a job to be done. When the downbeat hit and we bring Kyle on, everybody kind of goes crazy and screams. And then it's like, oh, they like us. Okay, we can play now. So then, honestly, from there on, I'm just concentrating on material. And I would look around, you look around, but it's like you see it as a whole instead of like making that eye contact with one person jamming like you do at the club.
Right.
I can always find the drummer in the club. I'm like, this guy's digging this over here. But as soon as they clapped and screamed and said, let us know that they're there to see us, it's like,
all right. Okay. So they make that noise. You play the first couple beats. You feel like you're in the zone. At that point, do you just settle in and go back to normal, or are you still worried about it as you're playing?
For me, I didn't worry about anything, but I want to make this artist look as good as I can, and I want to play his material as good as I can, because this is pivotal moment for him. He's in his hometown in front of more people than we've ever been in front of, and I'm just
more
thinking,
people that live in that town.
Oh yeah, people were traveling in from 3 states away. We were talking to people afterwards, and I mean, people were traveling because we did, I don't know, 17 shows or something, or I don't know, 12 or 17. I don't know the number, but people would travel in because that's the weekend they were available, and they would say, hey, I want to see this huge show.
Right.
So my focus immediately went to, okay, everything's intact. We have the set list. We have the charts. We know what we're going to do. Now, what can I do for Kyle? I want him to sound good. I want to play this material. And that's all I thought of. Next song, we're going straight into this one. This is our intro. Then it was just a job to do.
Did you get to take it in, though? Did you get to enjoy any of the moment itself?
Oh, yeah, the whole time. That's the other thing. You're like, the energy is so big. They had side fills on the stage that are bigger than most systems that you'll play on any county fair or small festival or club coming back at you. So it just sounds huge, and you see the other band members and they're having fun. Like I look over at Jason, he's smiling or something,
Jason Hill, bass player.
Jason Hill, that's right, yeah.
He's awesome too. And your sister was there.
She was, yeah. So, having that connection with everyone, like my sister's there, Jason Hill's there, Derek Isaac's there. There's some of my best friends in the world that I'm getting to do this with, including, Kyle even. Like that is like most of those guys, all of those people on that stage are like family to me. I've known Jason for 20 years. I've known Derek Isaacs for 30 years. Chelsea, my sister,
You've known her for at least a couple of years now.
Couple. Well, so Chelsea's 9 years younger than me. So, growing up,
And she's amazing too.
She is. She's great great person, great player.
Yeah, she's
Chelsea.
all right.
I don't give her too much of a hard time. It's
I
there.
She was on the show. She's awesome. Loved having her. Loved learning all about her. She's really great. I got to see her perform several times now too. So
Oh yeah.
I feel like I'm a lucky man at this point.
So I remember when she started on a pencil box and a ruler that was made into a violin. They taped a ruler on a pencil box,
and now she's on stage in front of 32,000 people, which is awesome.
That's right. That's right.
All right. So how does that moment compare to opening up for Tracy Byrd this past weekend?
So those two shows are in the same town. So we're going back to Ashland. We're back there Thursday night for the 4th of July. And still smaller venue. We played on the river. Still a huge stage. Tracy Byrd brought a lot of people out, and that is like Ashland's town. Yeah. Well, and so we got Kyle, he's from there. We got more of the hometown feel with this 4th of July show. And there's still thousands of people there. But it's more of a hometown feeling compared to what it was, I don't know where all those people were from, but there was a lot of people at that other show. But this would have more of the hometown feel for Kyle for sure. Because, he grew up watching that Summer Motion Festival go down.
Right.
And Tracy done a great job. I enjoyed his show. Enjoyed it. He was a great guy. Come up to us after the show, he had listened in and made the effort to say, "Hey guys, you sound great. I'm glad to hear you guys."
Dude, I mean, I had an opportunity to work with him once in the past, and it was just absolutely amazing. For me, I really enjoyed working on Watermelon Crawl.
Oh yeah,
I really enjoyed that. So I mean, but you guys were on the river. Were you floating on the river, or were you just on the edge of the river?
Just on the edge, like I drive down to the river, but we were on a boat dock, or not a boat dock, but a boat ramp, like in the street where the boat ramp would be. So, you jump off the back of the stage, you're going to get wet.
Were there any challenges to playing on that type of stage versus the other festival or even some of these other venues you play?
So the same setup, close to the same size stage at both venues. Only problem Thursday is we get there, and as it always happens, we had rain. So when we show up, it's raining. They're running squeegees and push brooms on the stage because it's just, a downpour. So everything's delayed. We're supposed to be there at 2:45 for a load in and sound check because Tracy was going to do one at 1 o'clock. Well, we get there and nobody's been off the bus. They set up the drum kit and tarped it. Everything else has not been unloaded. And we're thinking, okay, there's not going to be much of a sound check here. This is going to be, if it does stop raining, this is going to be a throw and go type of situation. So we kind of knew that was going to happen going in.
Does that make you nervous? Not just no sound check, but playing in the rain. Do you ever get any worry about like not being able to grip a stick or
not really as much as that as it is like the anticipation and the anxiety of like the hurry up and wait situation. You sit there for 3 hours and then the rain stops and then everybody's like, go, 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 go. We got to get you all on. We got to get this done, So it's just that like anticipation of like, okay, we got to get up there because downbeat's 7 o'clock.
Right.
So whether it stops raining at 5 or 6:15, we got to go. That showtime's at 7 and they want us on there, So it's more about that than it is playing the actual show. And then, we got a month ago, we were in front of a lot of people. So that kind of conditions you, like to, okay, we got this.
We got it. No problem. I mean, I can understand the concerns of like the guitar player, bass player, having cables that might be running through puddles and things like that. But for you, you're playing a kit. You're holding on to slick wooden sticks. You got your feet are on metal pedals that could just slip right off. It's got to be a concern of yours at some point.
Oh yeah. Well, there's always that concern. You just hope that they tuck you back far enough you don't have to worry about. You don't have to worry about the rain getting to you. But, they did come up to us and say, hey, no lightning, we're going on either way. But bearer of good news for once, it turned out to be a beautiful night. 5 o'clock, it quit raining. They put Tracy up there very quickly, put him down, got us up there. We got set up. We did our thing. And then we come on and played. It was a little rushed, but hey, we got to play and we did get a sound check. It wasn't like we didn't get one.
That's too funny. All right, sir. Well, we do this thing here we call Unsung Heroes, where we take a moment to shine the light on somebody who works behind the scenes or somebody who may have supported you along the way. Do you have anybody you'd like to shine a little light on?
Oh, gosh. Probably about, 20 people. But of course, the way we started this thing, my family has been, monumental with all my music, because that's where I learned it from. My dad, huge influence. He and I would go back and forth when I was younger, and I'm so glad that we did, because he was right about a lot of things. We talked about Avery, all those George Molton. We hadn't talked about George Molton yet. I played in that George Molton band for a while. Huge influence for me. I watched him play 17 years before I got to be in his band.
Wow.
So I was watching that music and watching his drummers then, and I get in the band 20 years later, and I'm like, oh, I want to try what that drummer did 20 years ago that I saw at Austin City. So I got to play with some pretty big stages with George as well. He does some pretty big events, but man, like I said, unsung heroes. There's so many. My heroes now are my kids, because they even. You say your kids allow you to do some things.
Sure.
I've got a
kids allow you to have time to get away from them for a moment.
That's right. Yeah. I got 15, 10, and 7. And so they were at the show Thursday night.
That's got to be awesome. What do they think of when they see you on stage?
Well, so my daughter, she's 7, and she's the only one that has been bit by the music bug herself yet. But I can tell she likes it. But my boys both play, and my daughter, she'll say, Daddy, are you famous? And I'll be like, not even close. Not even close. But she's like, but you get to play, this play. And I'm like, oh, yeah, and I'm thankful for that. But let's not say I'm famous. But only in my own mind, I'm a legend, And then my boys, they both have picked up music. I've got my oldest son, Solon. He plays drums, he plays bass, he plays guitar. We played Friday night at my marina to where we go to the lake where I have my boat. And him and his best friend got up and played, 4 or 5 songs with Kyle's band.
Oh, nice.
They are ready. And they're after it just like I was when I was that age. And I see so much of me in him, that fire, like he wants to do it. And then my son Sawyer is 10, and he's taking guitar lessons, and he's into the Nirvana and the, Guns N' Roses. He's my rocker. My 15-year-old is more my country guy. My 10-year-old is my rocker, and he'll say, hey, Dad, I want to learn how to play About a Girl by Nirvana, or he'll say, I want to learn how to play this song, So we'll sit down, and I'm like, okay, here, let me show you how. I know a little bit how to play that, on guitar. So it's like, I'll do the best I can, but ask your teacher. But they're unsung heroes for me, for sure.
A big thanks to Donnie for taking the time to share his stories with us. And as always, thank you for taking the time to hang with me here. I really do appreciate it. If you know anybody who would enjoy hearing Donnie's story, please be sure to share this episode. You can do that and find the links to everything mentioned over at jfranzi.com/episode 82. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Jay Franzi Show. Make sure you visit us at jfranzi.com. Follow, connect, and say hello. This episode has been brought to you by VR Knives, your source for 100% custom knives made by a true rock star. So, if you're in the market for a new piece of art, reach out to VR Knives. 407-421-5528. 407-421-5528.